The maid corrected the billionaire in Latin. Only later did he find out who she really was. Welcome back to our incredible storytelling community. If you're new here, make sure to smash that subscribe button and ring the notification bell, because you're about to witness a story that will completely change how you see the people around you. We absolutely love hearing from our global family, so please drop a comment telling us which corner of the world you're tuning in from today. Today's tale unfolds in the heart of Chicago, where assumptions collide with reality in the most unexpected way. Get comfortable, grab your favorite beverage, and prepare for a journey that proves intelligence and wisdom can be found in the most surprising places. This is a story about pride, prejudice, and the transformative power of recognizing true brilliance when it stands right before us. Chapter 1. The Ivory Tower. The 62nd floor of the Willis Tower commanded a breathtaking view of Lake Michigan, but Marcus Thornfield rarely took time to appreciate it. At 42, he had built Thornfield Industries into a pharmaceutical empire worth $8 billion, specializing in cutting-edge medical research and development. His corner office was a testament to his success. Original Renaissance paintings, first-edition medical texts, and awards from prestigious institutions lined the walls like trophies of intellectual conquest. This particular Tuesday morning found Marcus preparing for what he considered the most important presentation of his career. A consortium of European investors was arriving to discuss a revolutionary gene therapy he'd been developing, a treatment that could potentially cure hereditary blindness. The research represented 5 years of work and $300 million in investment, and today's meeting could secure the additional funding needed to bring it to human trials. Whilst in the complexity of CRISPR-Cas9 gene editing, Marcus rehearsed aloud, pacing before his wall-mounted monitor displaying molecular diagrams, lies in its precise targeting of specific DNA sequences. We utilize guide RNA to direct the Cas9 nucleus to the exact location where therapeutic intervention is required. He paused at his reflection in the floor-to-ceiling windows, adjusting his Italian silk tie. Marcus took pride in his reputation as both a brilliant scientist and successful businessman. His doctorate in molecular biology from Harvard, combined with his MBA from Wharton, had positioned him uniquely in the intersection of science and commerce. He'd authored dozens of peer-reviewed papers, held 17 patents, and been featured on the cover of Scientific American twice. The soft sound of the office door opening interrupted his preparation. Elena Vasquez entered quietly, carrying her cleaning supplies with the same methodical precision she brought to maintaining his office 3 times a week. At 34, she moved through his space with an efficiency that was almost invisible, exactly how Marcus preferred his domestic staff to operate. "Mr. Thornfield," Elena said softly, her slight accent coloring the formal address. "I can return later if you're preparing for your meeting." No, continue," Marcus replied without looking at her, his attention focused on fine-tuning his slides. "Just try to be quiet. This presentation could determine the future of revolutionary medical treatment." Elena nodded and began her work, dusting the extensive collection of medical journals and scientific texts that filled Marcus's custom-built bookcases. As she worked, Marcus continued his rehearsal, growing more animated as he delved into the technical details that excited him most. "The challenge with ocular gene therapy," he explained to his imaginary audience, "is achieving targeted delivery to retinal pigment epithelium cells while avoiding systemic exposure. Our novel vector system utilizes modified adeno-associated virus to ensure precise cellular uptake." He gestured dramatically toward a complex molecular model displayed on his screen, completely absorbed in the elegance of his scientific achievement. "This represents the culmination of decades of research in viral vector engineering and retinal cell biology." "Pardon, Mr. Thornfield," Elena's voice cut through his presentation, causing him to spin around in irritation. "What is it? I specifically asked for quiet." Elena hesitated, her dark eyes meeting his with an expression that was difficult to read. "I'm sorry to interrupt, but I couldn't help overhearing. You mentioned utilizing adeno-associated virus for retinal delivery." Marcus's eyebrows shot up in surprise and annoyance. "Yes, and, well, sir, AAV vectors have limited payload capacity, typically only 4.7 kilobases. For complex gene therapies requiring larger therapeutic genes, wouldn't lentiviral vectors provide superior cargo space despite the integration concerns?" The office fell completely silent. Marcus stared at Elena, his mouth slightly open, processing what he'd just heard. His cleaning lady, a woman he'd barely noticed in 2 years, had just questioned his scientific methodology using technical terminology that most postgraduate students would struggle with. "What did you just say?" Marcus asked slowly. Elena's cheeks flushed slightly, and she looked down at her cleaning supplies. "I apologize, Mr. Thornfield. I overstepped. I should focus on my work." "No, wait." Marcus said, his scientific curiosity overriding his social discomfort. Repeat what you said about lentiviral vectors. Elena took a deep breath. Lentiviral vectors can accommodate larger genetic payloads, up to 10 kilobases, which might be necessary if your therapeutic approach requires multiple genes or large regulatory sequences. However, they do integrate into the host genome, raising safety concerns for clinical applications. Marcus felt as though the ground had shifted beneath his feet. Not only had Elena demonstrated sophisticated knowledge of gene therapy vectors, but she'd identified a genuine limitation in his current approach, one his own research team had debated extensively. "How do you know about vector payload limitations?" he asked, his voice carrying a mixture of amazement and suspicion. I read," Elena replied carefully. "Scientific literature is available in public libraries." Marcus let out a sharp laugh that bordered on cruel. "You read Nature Biotechnology and Cell in the public library." While learning English as a second language, his tone grew more condescending. "Eleanor, these are highly technical journals requiring years of specialized education to understand. You can't just read molecular biology like a romance novel." Something flickered in Elena's eyes, hurt, perhaps, or disappointment, but her voice remained steady. "Of course, Mr. Thornfield, you're absolutely right. I'll return to my cleaning." As Eleanor resumed dusting his shelves, Marcus tried to refocus on his presentation, but his concentration was shattered. How had his housekeeper known about AAV payload limitations? Was it possible she'd encountered the information somewhere and was simply parroting technical terms without understanding their meaning? Yet her critique had been precise, relevant, and demonstrated understanding of the fundamental trade-offs in gene therapy design. These weren't concepts someone could stumble upon casually or misremember from pop science articles. Marcus found himself watching Elena more carefully as she worked. She moved through his collection of scientific texts with an almost reverent attention, her fingers lingering on certain volumes as if she were greeting old friends. When she reached his shelf of classical literature, books he'd collected for their prestige but rarely opened, she paused at a leather-bound volume of Virgil's Aeneid. "Beautiful edition," she murmured, almost to herself. "You recognize Latin poetry now, too?" Marcus asked sarcastically. Elena looked up, her expression unreadable. "Arma virumque cano, Troiae qui primus ab oris." "I've always found Virgil's opening lines particularly moving." Marcus felt his world tilt again. She'd not only recognized the Aeneid, but had quoted the opening lines in perfect Latin pronunciation. His own Latin, despite years of medical terminology, was functional at best. "Where exactly did you learn Latin?" he demanded. "Many places teach classical languages, Mr. Thornfield," Elena replied diplomatically. "I should finish your office before your important meeting." The rest of the morning passed in uncomfortable tension. Marcus tried to concentrate on his final preparations, but his attention kept drifting to Eleanor's quiet presence. When she finished and left without another word, he found himself staring at the door long after she'd gone. The European investors arrived at noon, distinguished men and women in expensive suits, carrying themselves with the confidence that comes from controlling vast amounts of capital. Marcus delivered his presentation flawlessly, fielding complex questions about clinical trial design, regulatory pathways, and market projections with his usual expertise. But throughout the meeting, he couldn't shake the memory of Elena's precise critique and her casual quotation of classical Latin. Who was this woman who cleaned his office? And how had she acquired knowledge that seemed to span molecular biology and ancient literature? As the investors departed, promising a decision within the week, Marcus found himself facing an uncomfortable truth. He had worked alongside Elena for 2 years, without once considering that she might be more than she appeared. He had seen her as invisible, a function rather than a person, and today she had shattered his assumptions with a few carefully chosen words. That evening, as Marcus sat in his penthouse apartment overlooking the Chicago skyline, he couldn't stop thinking about the contradiction between Eleanor's position and her knowledge. Had he misjudged her, or was there something more complex at play? The question would keep him awake long into the night, marking the beginning of a journey that would challenge everything he thought he knew about intelligence, worth, and the hidden depths that exist in every human being. Chapter 2. The Scholar's Shadow. The following morning, Marcus arrived at his office earlier than usual, hoping to catch Elena during her cleaning routine. He'd spent the previous evening researching AAV vector limitations, only to confirm that her critique had been not just accurate, but insightful. The payload capacity issue was indeed a significant constraint his team was still working to overcome. Elena appeared at precisely 8:30 a.m., as she had every Tuesday and Friday way for the past 2 years. Today, however, Marcus observed her with new attention. She moved through his office with the same quiet efficiency, but now he noticed details he'd previously overlooked. The way she carefully handled his books, the thoughtful expression that crossed her face as she organized his papers, the graceful precision of her movements. "Elena," Marcus said as she began arranging the scientific journals on his reading table, "I've been thinking about your comment yesterday." She paused, her hands stilling on a copy of Nature Medicine. "Shall I apologize again for the interruption, Mr. Thornfield?" "No, don't apologize. You were right about the payload limitations. My team has been struggling with that exact issue for months." Marcus studied her reaction carefully. "I'm curious how you came to understand such specialized concepts." Elena resumed her organizing, her voice carefully neutral. "Sometimes knowledge finds us in unexpected ways." The diplomatic non-answer only intensified Marcus's curiosity. "Elena, I need to ask you directly, what's your educational background?" For a long moment, Elena didn't respond. She continued her work, but Marcus could see tension in the set of her shoulders, as if she were weighing carefully how much truth to reveal. "I studied at Universidad Nacional Autónoma de México," she said finally, "before coming to the United States." "Studied what?" Another pause. "Molecular biology." With a focus on genetic engineering applications, Marcus felt his assumptions crumble completely. "You have a degree in molecular biology from UNAM. That's one of the most prestigious universities in Latin America." Elena's hands stilled completely now. "I have a doctorate, actually, but degrees from Mexican institutions don't always translate easily to opportunities in American research." The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. For 2 years, he had unknowingly employed a fellow scientist as his cleaning lady. A woman with a doctorate in his own field had been quietly maintaining his office while he delivered presentations on research she clearly understood as well as he did. "Elena, Dr. Vasquez," Marcus corrected himself, the title feeling strange but necessary on his tongue. "Why didn't you ever mention your background?" Elena turned to face him fully, and for the first time since he'd known her, she didn't avert her eyes. "When would that conversation have occurred, Mr. Thornfield? In the 2 years I've worked here, you've spoken to me perhaps a dozen times, and always about cleaning schedules or building maintenance." The observation was delivered without malice, but it landed with devastating accuracy. Marcus realized he couldn't recall a single instance when he'd engaged Elena in any conversation beyond the most basic professional necessities. "You're right," he admitted, feeling heat rise in his cheeks. I haven't been particularly attentive to you as a person." "Most people aren't," Elena replied simply. "When you're the person who empties trash bins and dusts furniture, you become invisible. People don't expect you to have opinions about their work, much less expertise in their field." Marcus sank into his desk chair, overwhelmed by the implications of what she was telling him. "What was your research focus at UNAM?" "Gene therapy vectors for treating inherited metabolic disorders," Elena answered. "Specifically, I worked on optimizing lentiviral delivery systems for enzyme replacement therapy in lysosomal storage diseases." Marcus's jaw dropped. Elena's research area was not only relevant to his current work, but represented some of the most challenging aspects of gene therapy design. Lysosomal storage diseases required precise targeting and long-term expression, exactly the kind of complex problems his own lab struggled with daily. "You worked on lentiviral optimization," Marcus repeated slowly. "Eleanor, my research team has been trying to solve vector efficiency problems for 3 years. We've consulted with experts from MIT, Stanford, Harvard, and meanwhile, the person who could help you has been cleaning your office twice a week," Elena finished quietly. The irony was so profound it was almost absurd. Marcus had been paying consultant fees to renowned scientists, while employing someone with potentially superior expertise for minimum wage as domestic help. "Why are you working as a cleaning lady?" Marcus asked, immediately realizing how insensitive the question sounded. Elena's expression hardened slightly. "Because when I arrived in Chicago 5 years ago, I discovered that having a doctorate from a Mexican university means very little to American research institutions. I applied for postdoctoral positions, research associate roles, even laboratory technician positions. I was told repeatedly that my credentials needed validation, that my English wasn't adequate for scientific communication, that I lacked cultural fit." She moved to the window, looking out over the city that had proven so unwelcoming to her professional aspirations. "I have student loans to repay, rent to pay, food to buy. Cleaning pays better than waiting tables, and the evening schedule allowed me to audit chemistry courses at Northwestern, hoping to eventually gain the credentials that would make me acceptable to American scientists." Marcus felt a wave of shame wash over him. While he'd been building his empire and receiving accolades for his brilliance, a woman with comparable expertise had been struggling to survive economically because the scientific establishment couldn't see past her accent and foreign credentials. "You've been auditing courses at Northwestern?" he asked. "For 3 years, I've completed graduate-level coursework in advanced molecular biology, bioinformatics, and regulatory science. But auditing doesn't provide official credentials, and without those credentials, I remain invisible to the scientific community." Elena turned back to face him, and Marcus saw something in her expression he'd never noticed before. Not just intelligence, but a deep well of frustration and unfulfilled potential. "The work you presented yesterday," she continued, "your approach to retinal gene therapy, it's elegant work, but there are optimization strategies that could improve your success rates significantly." "Such as?" Elena hesitated, as if unsure whether to reveal more of her expertise. "Your current vector design uses a ubiquitous promoter, which risks expression in unintended cell types. A rhodopsin kinase promoter would provide retinal-specific expression while reducing systemic exposure." Marcus stared at her in amazement. She was absolutely right, and her suggestion represented exactly the kind of sophisticated thinking his team had been struggling to develop. "Elena, I need to ask you something, and I want you to be completely honest with me. How much do you know about my current research?" "I've read your published papers," Elena admitted. "All of them. Your work on AAV vector engineering for ocular applications is groundbreaking, but there are approaches you haven't explored that could address the payload limitations we discussed yesterday." "You've read all my papers? They're excellent work, Dr. Thornfield. Your 2019 publication in Gene Therapy on Retinal Targeting was particularly insightful. But if I may say so, you're approaching the packaging problem from a purely engineering perspective when a biological solution might be more elegant." Marcus felt as though he was discovering a hidden treasure in his own office. Elena wasn't just knowledgeable about gene therapy, she was thinking about his problems with the kind of creative insight that separated good scientists from great ones. "Would you?" Marcus began, then stopped, realizing he was about to cross a line that could never be uncrossed. "Would you be willing to look at my current research data? As a consultant, I would pay you properly for your expertise." Elena's eyes widened in surprise. "You're offering me scientific work?" "I'm recognizing that I've been blind to an extraordinary resource," Marcus said, finally understanding the full scope of his oversight. "Elena, I think you might be exactly the collaborator I've been looking for, and I've been too prejudiced to see it." For the first time since he'd known her, Elena smiled, not the polite, professional expression she'd always worn, but a genuine smile that transformed her entire face. "I would be honored to contribute to your research, Dr. Thornfield." As Elena gathered her cleaning supplies, preparing to leave for her other job, Marcus realized that this conversation had fundamentally altered not just his perception of her, but his understanding of how intelligence and expertise could be hidden in plain sight by social assumptions and systemic barriers. The woman he'd dismissed as the cleaning lady was about to become his most valuable research partner, and for the first time in years, Marcus felt genuinely excited about the scientific breakthroughs that might be possible when brilliant minds were finally allowed to collaborate as equals. Chapter 3. The Hidden Genius. By Thursday, Marcus had rearranged his entire schedule. Instead of his usual morning routine of emails and administrative tasks, he found himself eagerly awaiting Elena's arrival. He'd spent the previous evening reviewing her suggestions about promoter selection and vector optimization, quickly realizing that her insights could revolutionize his approach to gene therapy delivery. Elena appeared at exactly 8:30 a.m., but today she carried a small leather portfolio alongside her cleaning supplies. The sight of her trying to balance both her old identity and her emerging new role struck Marcus as somehow symbolic of the larger transformation taking place. "Good morning, Dr. Vasquez," Marcus said, deliberately using her proper title. Eleanor's smile was small but genuine. "Good morning, Dr. Thornfield. I brought some preliminary notes on your vector design, if you have time to discuss them." "I've cleared my morning specifically for this," Marcus replied, gesturing toward the conference table he'd set up with his research data. "Yes, but first, I need to address something important." Elena paused, her expression becoming cautious. "I've been thinking about our arrangement," Marcus continued. "Having you work as my cleaning lady while also serving as a scientific consultant it's wrong on multiple levels. I'd like to offer you a position as a research associate in my laboratory." Elena's eyes widened. "Dr. Thornfield, are you certain? My credentials?" "Your credentials are your knowledge, your insights, and your ability to solve problems," Marcus interrupted. "I've learned more about vector optimization from one conversation conversation with you than from 6 months of consultant meetings with supposed experts. He pulled out a formal offer letter he'd had his legal team prepare. This is a position with full benefits, a salary commensurate with your expertise, and the opportunity to be listed as co-principal investigator on any research we develop together. Elena stared at the document, her hands trembling slightly as she read the details. The salary was more than triple what she earned from all her cleaning jobs combined. Co-principal investigator, she whispered. Eleanor, I suspect that once we start working together, it will become clear that this partnership is between equals. I want that reflected in our official collaboration from the beginning. Eleanor sat down heavily, overwhelmed by the sudden transformation of her circumstances. Dr. Thornfield, I don't know what to say. Say yes, and then show me these ideas you've been developing. Elena opened her portfolio with shaking hands, revealing pages of detailed notes, molecular diagrams, and research proposals. Marcus leaned in to study her work and immediately felt his excitement building. This is remarkable, he murmured, examining a detailed schematic for a novel vector design. You've addressed the payload limitation by developing a split vector system, trans-splicing vectors, Elena explained, her scientific confidence gradually overriding her emotional overwhelm. By dividing large therapeutic genes across 2 separate vectors that recombine after transduction, we can deliver much larger genetic payloads while maintaining the safety profile of AAV vectors. Marcus studied the design more carefully, his admiration growing with each detail. This is brilliant, Elena. Have you tested this approach? Only computational modeling, Elena admitted. I don't have access to laboratory facilities for actual experiments. You do now, Marcus said firmly. Elena, this could solve the fundamental limitation that's been constraining gene therapy for decades. As they worked through Elena's proposals, Marcus began to understand that he wasn't just gaining a research partner, he was discovering a scientist whose thinking was more innovative than his own. Her approach to complex problems combined rigorous technical knowledge with creative leaps that pushed beyond conventional boundaries. Say there's something else, Elena said, pulling out another set of diagrams. Your current research focuses on single gene disorders, but I've been thinking about more complex therapeutic applications. She spread out a detailed proposal for treating multiple genetic targets simultaneously. Neurological conditions like Huntington's disease require intervention at multiple pathways. Instead of developing separate therapies for each target, what if we could design vector systems that deliver therapeutic packages, multiple genes working synergistically? Marcus felt his heart rate accelerate as he grasped the implications. You're talking about creating therapeutic ecosystems rather than single interventions. Exactly. The human body is an interconnected system. Our therapeutic approach should reflect that complexity rather than treating genes in isolation. Marcus leaned back in his chair, stunned by the scope of Elena's vision. Her proposals weren't just improvements to existing approaches, they represented a fundamentally new paradigm for genetic medicine. Elena, how long have you been developing these concepts? Years, she admitted. I've been working on them in my spare time, using public computers at the library to run computational models. When you can't afford laboratory access, you learn to develop very detailed theoretical frameworks. The poignancy of her situation struck Marcus forcefully. While he'd had unlimited access to equipment, funding, and collaborative resources, Elena had been conducting cutting-edge research using library computers and borrowed textbooks. Yet her work showed a sophistication that surpassed most university research programs. I have a confession, Marcus said. Yesterday, I shared your vector optimization suggestion with my research team, without mentioning the source. They were so excited they wanted to immediately redesign our entire experimental approach. Eleanor's expression was unreadable. And you didn't tell them the idea came from your cleaning lady? I should have, Marcus said, feeling ashamed. I was trying to protect you from their potential prejudices, but I realize now that I was perpetuating the same invisibility that's kept your contributions hidden. Eleanor was quiet for a moment, considering his words. What will you tell them now? The truth. That I've discovered one of the most brilliant scientists I've ever encountered, and she's been working in our building for 2 years while we failed to recognize her expertise. They may not respond well to that revelation, Marcus smiled grimly. Then they'll learn the same lesson I'm learning, that intelligence and insight don't always come in the packages we expect. Their conversation was interrupted by Marcus's assistant, announcing the arrival of his research team for their weekly progress meeting. Marcus looked at Elena, seeing both excitement and apprehension in her expression. Are you ready to meet your new colleagues? He asked. Elena took a deep breath, closing her portfolio portfolio and straightening her shoulders. Dr. Thornfield, I've been ready for this opportunity my entire career. As Marcus's team filed into the conference room, 5 accomplished scientists with impressive credentials and established reputations, Marcus realized he was about to challenge not just their scientific assumptions, but their fundamental beliefs about who deserved recognition and respect in their field. Everyone, I'd like you to meet Dr. Elena Vasquez, our new co-principal investigator, Marcus announced. She's going to be leading our research in some exciting new directions. The team's polite smiles and perfunctory greetings couldn't hide their confusion and skepticism. Marcus understood their reaction. Elena was an unknown scientist with no visible institutional affiliation, no publications in prestigious journals, no network of professional connections. But as Elena began presenting her trans-splicing vector concept, the room's atmosphere shifted dramatically. Her explanation was clear, sophisticated, and backed by rigorous theoretical work. By the time she finished outlining her therapeutic ecosystem approach, Marcus's team was asking detailed technical questions with genuine excitement. Dr. Vasquez asked Dr. Jennifer Chen, Marcus's lead researcher, have you published work on trans-splicing vectors? Not yet, Elena replied. I've been developing these concepts independently, without institutional support. Independently. Dr. Robert Harrison, the team's senior scientist, looked puzzled. Where have you been conducting your research? Elena met his gaze steadily. Until this week, I've been working as a cleaning lady while developing these ideas in my spare time. The room fell silent. Marcus watched his team process this information, seeing their worldviews adjust in real time as they reconciled Elena's obvious expertise with their preconceptions about who could be a serious scientist. You developed vector optimization strategies while working as cleaning staff, Dr. Chen asked, her tone filled with amazement rather than condescension. Scientific thinking doesn't require laboratory access, Elena replied. It requires curiosity, rigor, and the willingness to see problems from new perspectives. As the meeting progressed, Marcus watched his team's initial skepticism transform into genuine respect and excitement. Elena's ideas weren't just theoretically sound, they offered practical solutions to problems the team had been struggling with for years. By the end of the session, they had outlined a collaborative research plan that incorporated Elena's innovations into their existing projects while developing entirely new experimental directions based on her therapeutic ecosystem concept. As the team dispersed, energized by new possibilities, Marcus found himself alone with Elena once again. Darcy, how do you feel? He asked. Elena smiled, and Marcus saw something in her expression he'd never witnessed before, the look of someone who had finally found her place in the world. Like I'm finally home, she said simply. Marcus nodded, understanding that Elena's journey from invisibility to recognition was just beginning. But he also knew that their collaboration would change not just their research, but their fundamental understanding of how genius could be hidden in plain sight, waiting for someone wise enough to look beyond surface appearances and social assumptions. The cleaning lady had become the co-principal investigator, and in the process, she was about to revolutionize the field of genetic medicine. Chapter 4. The Revelation. 3 weeks into their collaboration, Marcus's laboratory had been transformed. Elena's presence brought not just new scientific perspectives, but an energy and focus that elevated everyone's work. The trans-splicing vector project was progressing faster than any research initiative Marcus had ever undertaken, and preliminary results were exceeding their most optimistic projections. This particular Friday morning found Marcus arriving at the lab to discover Elena already at work, bent over a microscope examining cell cultures with the intense concentration of someone who had waited years for this opportunity. You're here early, Marcus observed, setting down his coffee beside the experimental setup they'd been developing together. I couldn't sleep, Elena admitted, not looking up from her microscope. These transduction rates are remarkable, Dr. Thornfield. The split vector system is achieving 90% efficiency in retinal pigment epithelium cells. Marcus moved to check the data himself, feeling the familiar thrill of scientific breakthrough. After months of struggling with conventional vectors that achieved barely 40% efficiency, Elena's innovation had more than doubled their success rate. Elena, this is going to change everything, he said, studying the fluorescence images that demonstrated successful gene delivery. We need to prepare these results for publication immediately. Elena straightened, a strange expression crossing her face. About publication, Dr. Thornfield, there's something I need to tell you. Something in her tone made Marcus look up from the microscope. What is it? Elena moved away from the workbench, her usual confident demeanor replaced by obvious nervousness. I haven't been entirely honest with you about my background. Marcus felt a chill of apprehension. What do you mean? My research at UNAM, Elena began carefully. It wasn't just doctoral work. I was part of a collaborative project with researchers from Harvard Medical School and the Broad Institute. We were developing gene therapy approaches for rare genetic disorders affecting indigenous populations in Mexico. She paused, as if gathering courage to continue. The work was published in Nature Medicine 3 years ago. It won the International Gene Therapy Society's Outstanding Research Award. Marcus stared at her, trying to process what she was telling him. You published in Nature Medicine. That's one of the most prestigious journals in medical science. The lead author was Dr. Carmen Elena Vasquez Rodriguez, Elena said quietly. I shortened my name when I came to the United States. Marcus felt the ground shift beneath his feet. Carmen Elena Vasquez Rodriguez. I know that name. His mind raced through his memory of recent scientific literature. Your Vasquez Rodriguez. You developed the modified lentiviral vectors for treating beta thalassemia. Elena nodded, her expression a mixture of relief and apprehension at having her true identity revealed. Elena, your work revolutionized gene therapy for blood disorders. I've cited your research in my own papers. You're one of the leading experts in the field. Marcus's voice rose with amazement and disbelief. You're not just a scientist, you're a scientific celebrity. I was, Elena corrected. In Mexico, in certain circles. But when I came to Chicago, I discovered that even published researchers from Latin American institutions face significant barriers in American science. Marcus sank into a nearby chair, overwhelmed by the implications. You're telling me that Dr. Vasquez Rodriguez, whose work I've admired for years, has been cleaning my office for 2 years. The scientific community is smaller than you might think, Dr. Thornfield. When you have a foreign name and a Mexican institutional affiliation, many people make assumptions about the quality of your work without examining it closely. Marcus thought back to his own behavior, remembering how he'd dismissed Elena's knowledge as impossible for someone like her to possess. The irony was staggering. He'd been condescending to a scientist whose published work he'd studied and respected. Elena, why didn't you tell me who you were from the beginning? Elena's expression grew sad. Because I tried that approach when I first arrived. I led with my credentials, my publications, my research experience. The responses were always the same. Polite interest followed by explanations of why my background wasn't quite suitable for their specific needs. She moved to the window overlooking the Chicago medical district. Eventually, I realized that my reputation only existed within certain circles. Outside of gene therapy specialists who knew my specific research, I was just another foreign scientist with an accent and credentials that needed validation. Marcus felt a deep shame wash over him as he understood the fuller picture of Elena's situation. Not only had she been working below her qualifications, she was one of the most accomplished researchers in their shared field, forced into domestic work by systemic barriers and unconscious bias. The cleaning work, Marcus said slowly. It was never supposed to be permanent. I thought it would be temporary while I established myself, Elena confirmed. But months turned into years. I began to doubt whether I would ever return to research, whether my scientific career was effectively over. Marcus stood up and began pacing, his mind racing through the implications of Elena's revelation. Elena, do you realize what this means for our collaboration? You're not just contributing to my research. You're bringing expertise that's potentially superior to my own. Science isn't a competition, Dr. Thornfield, Elena said gently. It's a collaborative pursuit of understanding. Your work on retinal applications complements my background in vector engineering perfectly. But the recognition, the credit? Marcus struggled with the realization that Elena deserved not just equal partnership, but potentially primary recognition for the innovations they'd been developing. Elena turned back to face him, her expression serious. Dr. Thornfield, I need you to understand something. When I accepted your offer to work as a research associate, I made peace with starting over. I'm grateful for the opportunity to return to science, regardless of the recognition I receive. That's not acceptable, Marcus said firmly. Eleanor, your contributions to this research aren't just valuable, they're transformative. You deserve full credit for your innovations. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Dr. Harrison and Dr. Chen, both carrying coffee and excited expressions. Dr. Thornfield, Dr. Vasquez, Dr. Chen called out. We've been reviewing the vector efficiency data from yesterday's experiments. These results are extraordinary. They're more than extraordinary, Dr. Harrison added. They're paradigm shifting. We need to fast-track publication and start preparing patent applications immediately. Marcus looked at Elena, seeing both excitement and uncertainty in her expression. Before we proceed, there's something everything you need to know about Dr. Vasquez's background. Over the next hour, Marcus and Elena explained the full scope of Elena's scientific credentials and published research. The team's reaction mirrored Marcus's own journey from surprise to amazement to profound respect. "Your CPOE, Vasquez Rodriguez?" Dr. Chen asked, her voice filled with awe. "Your lentiviral optimization work inspired my doctoral thesis." "Wait," Dr. Harrison said, pulling out his phone to search for Elena's publications. "You developed the vector system we've been trying to improve for 3 years. You've been sitting on solutions to our biggest research challenges this entire time." Elena smiled ruefully. "I've been trying to contribute those solutions, but they were developed by the cleaning lady, so they didn't carry much weight initially." The room fell silent as the team processed the full implications of what had transpired. They had unknowingly overlooked one of the most accomplished researchers in their field, allowing prejudice and assumptions to blind them to extraordinary expertise. "Dr. Vasquez," Dr. Chen said slowly, "would you be willing to be the lead author on our upcoming publications? Your theoretical framework is the foundation of everything we're developing." Elena looked surprised. "That's not necessary. I'm grateful to contribute as part of the team." "It's not about gratitude," Marcus interjected. "It's about scientific integrity. Credit should reflect contribution, and your contributions have been fundamental to every breakthrough we've achieved." As the meeting progressed, they restructured their entire research program to properly reflect Elena's leadership role. What had begun as Marcus's retinal gene therapy project was evolving into a comprehensive genetic medicine platform with Elena as the principal architect. By the end of the session, they had outlined a publication strategy that would establish Elena as the senior author on their most significant papers, with Marcus and the team serving as collaborating investigators. The reversal of their original hierarchy felt not just appropriate, but essential for scientific honesty. As the team dispersed to implement their new research directions, Marcus found himself alone with Elena once again. "How does it feel?" he asked. "How to be recognized for who you really are?" Elena was quiet for a moment, her fingers tracing the edge of the laboratory bench where she'd spent the last weeks rediscovering her scientific identity. "Surreal," she admitted. "For 3 years, I wondered if I'd ever be seen as a scientist again. I started to doubt my own abilities, to question whether my previous success had been somehow illusory." Marcus felt the weight of responsibility for Elena's lost years. "Elena, I contributed to that erasure. I had the power to recognize your expertise years ago, and I failed to see beyond my own assumptions." "Marcus," Elena said, using his first name for the first time since their collaboration began, "you can't take responsibility for an entire system that values prestige over insight, credentials over capability. What matters is that you were willing to change when presented with evidence that challenged your preconceptions." That afternoon brought an unexpected visitor. Dr. Amanda Richardson, the editor-in-chief of Nature Medicine, had flown in from Boston specifically to meet with their research team. Word of their breakthrough results had spread through the scientific community with remarkable speed. "Dr. Vasquez Rodriguez, Dr. Richardson said as she entered the laboratory, extending her hand to Elena with obvious recognition and respect. "It's an honor to meet you in person. Your work on lentiviral vector optimization has been cited over 300 times since publication." Elena shook her hand, still adjusting to being addressed by her full professional identity. "Thank you, Dr. Richardson. I wasn't expecting this level of attention for our preliminary results." "Preliminary?" Dr. Richardson laughed. "Dr. Vasquez, from what I understand, you've solved the payload limitation problem that has constrained gene therapy for over a decade. This isn't preliminary research. This is a fundamental breakthrough." Marcus watched the interaction with a mixture of pride and chagrin. Elena was receiving the recognition she deserved, but he couldn't ignore the fact that this acknowledgement had taken 3 years to materialize. 3 years during which she'd been invisible to the very scientific community that now celebrated her innovations. "Dr. Richardson," Elena said carefully, "I want to ensure that you understand this work represents a true collaboration. Dr. Thornfield and his team have been essential partners in developing these applications." "Of course," Dr. Richardson replied, "but the theoretical framework, the vector design innovations, the therapeutic ecosystem concept, these are clearly your contributions. We'd like to feature your work as the cover story for our next issue, with a companion editorial about recognizing talent in unexpected places." The irony was profound. Elena's journey from invisibility to scientific celebrity would itself become a subject of academic discussion, a case study in how brilliance could be overlooked when it didn't conform to expected patterns. Over the following weeks, Elena's restoration to scientific prominence accelerated rapidly. Invitations poured in from universities offering research positions, pharmaceutical companies seeking collaborations, and conferences requesting keynote presentations. The woman who had been scrubbing floors was suddenly in demand as one of the most innovative minds in genetic medicine. But rather than leaving Thornfield Industries for more prestigious opportunities, Elena chose to remain and build something unprecedented, a research institute that would specifically seek out and support brilliant minds from non-traditional backgrounds. CIMT, the Vasquez Thornfield Institute for Inclusive Innovation, Elena announced during a team meeting 6 weeks after her revelation, will recruit talented researchers regardless of their institutional pedigree, their country of origin, or their current employment status. Marcus Batt, who had provided the funding for the institute without hesitation, understood the broader vision Elena was articulating. "We're not just conducting research," he said. "We're creating a new model for how scientific talent can be recognized and developed." "Exactly," Elena agreed. "How many brilliant minds are currently invisible because they don't fit conventional expectations? How many potential breakthroughs are we missing because we only look for genius in familiar packages?" The institute's first recruitment effort yielded remarkable results. Among their initial hires were a former taxi driver with a PhD in computational biology, a restaurant worker who had developed novel protein folding algorithms, and a retired teacher whose understanding of plant genetics rivaled that of tenured professors. Each new hire vindicated Elena's thesis that extraordinary talent existed in unexpected places, waiting for recognition and opportunity. Chapter 5. The Legacy. 1 year later, the Vasquez Thornfield Institute had become the most talked-about research facility in Chicago. Their laboratories buzzed with activity as teams of unconventional scientists tackled problems that traditional institutions had failed to solve. The Institute's approach, valuing insight over credentials, innovation over institutional prestige, was producing breakthroughs at an unprecedented rate. Marcus stood in the Institute's main conference room, preparing for what would be their most significant announcement yet. The trans-splicing vector technology Elena had developed was about to enter human trials, with results that promised to revolutionize treatment for dozens of genetic disorders. "Are you ready for this?" Elena asked, joining him at the podium they'd set up for the press conference. Marcus looked at his colleague, no longer his employee but his equal partner in building something that transcended traditional scientific boundaries. Elena wore the confidence of someone who had reclaimed her place in the world, but also carried the wisdom that came from understanding how easily that place could be lost. "The question is whether the world is ready for what we're about to announce," Marcus replied. The conference room filled with journalists, scientists, patients, advocates, and investors, all eager to hear about the latest developments from the Institute that had captured the attention of the global medical community. "Ladies and gentlemen," Marcus began, "thank you for joining us today. What we're about to share represents not just a scientific breakthrough, but a demonstration of what becomes possible when we expand our understanding of where genius can be found." He gestured to Eleanor, who stepped forward to address the audience with the poise of someone who had always belonged on such stages, even when the world had failed to provide them. "The trans-splicing vector technology we've developed," Elena explained, "has successfully treated inherited blindness in our first cohort of clinical trial participants. 12 patients who were born with Leber congenital amaurosis can now see." The room erupted in applause and excited murmurs. Restoring sight to the blind represented one of medicine's most profound achievements, a breakthrough that would impact millions of lives worldwide. "But the broader significance," Elena continued as the room quieted, "lies in how this discovery was made. This technology was developed by a team that includes former cleaning staff, taxi drivers, restaurant workers, and other individuals who were overlooked by traditional academic institutions." She paused, letting the implications settle over the audience. "We've demonstrated that revolutionary science can emerge from anywhere if we're wise enough to recognize and nurture talent, regardless of its packaging." During the question and answer session, a journalist raised her hand. "Dr. Vasquez Rodriguez, can you comment on your own journey from domestic work to leading this breakthrough research?" Elena smiled, no longer uncomfortable with questions about her unusual path. "My experience taught me that circumstances don't diminish capability. Whether someone is cleaning offices or leading laboratories, their potential for insight and innovation remains constant. The only variable is whether society provides opportunities for that potential to be realized." Another journalist addressed Marcus. "Dr. Thornfield, how has this collaboration changed your approach to scientific leadership?" Marcus considered the question carefully. "It taught me that true leadership means creating conditions where the best ideas can emerge, regardless of their source." Elena didn't just contribute to our research. She transformed our entire understanding of how science should be conducted. He looked at Elena, remembering the morning when she'd corrected his Latin and challenged his assumptions about gene therapy vectors. "The most profound discoveries often come from perspectives we haven't considered," from voices we haven't been listening to. As the press conference concluded and the audience dispersed, Marcus and Elena found themselves in the quiet laboratory where their collaboration had begun. The space had been transformed from a traditional research facility into something more dynamic. Workbenches occupied by diverse teams, whiteboards covered with equations and diagrams reflecting multiple scientific disciplines, an environment that buzzed with the energy of unrestrained intellectual curiosity. "Or do you ever think about what would have happened if I hadn't overheard your presentation that day?" Elena asked, settling into one of the comfortable chairs they'd added to make the lab more welcoming for extended collaboration sessions. "I think we would have found each other eventually," Marcus replied. "Brilliance has a way of revealing itself, even when systems try to keep it hidden," Elena smiled. "That's optimistic of you." "It's realistic," Marcus corrected. "You were always going to make important contributions to science, Elena. The only question was whether those contributions would happen in my laboratory or someone else's." They sat in comfortable silence, watching through the laboratory windows as evening fell over Chicago. The city lights stretched endlessly in all directions, and Marcus found himself thinking about how many other talented individuals might be out there, waiting for recognition and opportunity. "What's next?" Elena asked. "We expand," Marcus said immediately. "We open institutes in other cities, other countries. We develop programs that actively seek out overlooked talent. We prove that our model can be replicated and scaled." Elena nodded. "I've been thinking about establishing partnerships with universities in Latin America, Africa, Asia, places where brilliant researchers might not have access to advanced laboratory facilities. A global network of inclusive innovation," Marcus mused. "I love it." Their conversation was interrupted by a soft knock on the laboratory door. Dr. Chen entered, carrying a bottle of champagne and wearing an expression of barely contained excitement. "I hope I'm not interrupting," she said, "but I couldn't wait until tomorrow to share this news." "What is it?" Elena asked. "The Nobel Committee has requested detailed information about our trans-splicing vector research," Dr. Chen announced. "We're being considered for the Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine." Marcus felt his heart skip a beat. The Nobel Prize represented the highest recognition in scientific achievement, validation that their work had fundamentally advanced human knowledge. But as he looked at Elena, he saw something more complex in her expression than simple excitement. The woman who had been invisible for 3 years might soon receive the most visible recognition in science. "How do you feel about that possibility?" Marcus asked her quietly. Elena was thoughtful for a moment. "Honored, of course, but also aware that this recognition belongs not just to me, but to everyone whose talent has been overlooked. If we receive this award, I want to use the platform to advocate for systemic changes in how we identify and develop scientific potential." Marcus nodded, understanding that Elena's vision extended far beyond personal recognition. She wanted to transform the entire ecosystem of scientific discovery, ensuring that future brilliant minds wouldn't have to wait years for their contributions to be acknowledged. As Dr. Chen left to join the celebration in the main conference room, Marcus and Elena remained in the quiet laboratory, surrounded by the equipment and experiments that had grown from their unlikely collaboration. "You know," Marcus said, "I used to think success meant accumulating achievements and recognition for myself, but working with you has taught me something different." "What's that?" "That the most meaningful success comes from creating opportunities for others to achieve their potential, from building systems that recognize and nurture talent wherever it exists." Elena smiled, the expression carrying warmth that had nothing to do with professional accomplishment and everything to do with human connection. "Marcus, you've given me back my scientific identity, but more than that, you've helped create something that will prevent other talented people from losing theirs." As they prepared to join their colleagues in celebration, Marcus reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought them to this moment: a chance encounter, a Latin correction, a recognition of hidden expertise, small moments that had cascaded into discoveries that would impact millions of lives. The maid who had corrected the billionaire in Latin had revealed herself to be one of the most innovative scientists of her generation. But perhaps more importantly, their collaboration had demonstrated that genius existed everywhere, waiting for the wisdom to recognize it and the courage to act on that recognition. Outside the laboratory windows, Chicago sparkled with possibility, and Marcus knew that their work was just beginning. They had proven that revolutionary science could emerge from the most unexpected places. Now they would dedicate themselves to ensuring that no brilliant mind would ever again remain invisible, no matter where it originated or how it was packaged. The institute they had built together would stand as a testament to a simple but profound truth: that in a world full of hidden genius, the greatest discovery was learning how to see. The end. What an incredible journey we've shared together. If this story moved you and opened your eyes to the hidden potential around us, please hit that subscribe button and ring the bell for notifications. We have so many more inspiring stories stories to share with our amazing global community. Drop a comment and let us know where in the world you're listening from. We love connecting with thoughtful viewers like you. Remember, everyone you meet has hidden depths and untapped potential. Sometimes the most extraordinary people are hiding in plain sight, waiting for someone wise enough to truly see them. Until our next story, keep your eyes open for the genius that surrounds us every day.